two things I'd like to add to that. First, I don't think that was you deviating from this process at all. You read the room. You know me well enough to know that if there was going to be movement on this issue, you were going to have to push more.
If I want to help Mason change, I have to push him off a cliff.
Well,
and then he sprouts his wings and he flies and he lands back up next to me and he's like, "Why did you push me?" And then a week later he's like, "Oh yeah."
Well, that's part of knowing the people in your life, right? So if you're trying to have a conversation with someone that you don't know very well, there's probably going to be more fumbling because you don't know what they need. In this case, you didn't know how I would respond. You just knew that if there was going to be movement, you had to push more.
Right. So this is why Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snap are such a train wreck, because I mean, we're having arguments and debates with people we do not even know. Right. And it's so unhealthy.
And it's
totally entertaining, but it's so unhealthy.
And it tends to be very impersonal, even when it's with someone you know. And the second thing that I wanted to add,
I want to slow you down. I love that you said that, because if you're going to engage in these conversations, it needs to be with somebody that you have a personal relationship with. Like this conversation that we're going to talk about today, this is personal.
Yeah.
So if the individual you're engaging in isn't going to have that type of an influence in your life, maybe you need to rethink what you're saying or doing, right, or how you're engaging. Go ahead, Mason.
Yeah. Well, and the second thing is actually it's on the first page of what you had me read from Gottman, a little quote that's here, and it just says, "Do not argue for or try to persuade your partner of your point of view. Just explain how you see things. Tell your partner your thoughts and feelings about your position on the issue."
Okay, so pause. You can find this quote on the Gottman-Rappaport intervention worksheet. Go.
All right. And just it speaks to what is the intention of this conversation. If you go into the conversation trying to convince somebody of something, more often than not, you're probably going to fail. But if you go into the conversation just seeking to be understood and to understand, you may not get where you want to get in the conversation, but you will come out with better and more information than you had.
Right. Well, and, Mason, what you're talking about is the reason you're going to fail if you're trying to convince your partner of your point of view is nobody does convincing well. If right. I'm trying to change your opinion, my amygdala is going to get fired up. If I want somebody to be open to a change of mind or a change of viewpoint, I have to understand where they're coming from first.
Right.
I can't just go in and be like, "No, you're wrong. And this is why you're wrong." And how can you not, how can you not read the CES letter? Like one of the biggest comments I'm getting right now from people, Mason, I think I've shared this with you, is how can Mason know all of this stuff and still believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as being true? And I go, I don't know. But it's not my job to convince you otherwise.
Right.
It's my job to understand where you are, which is why I check in with you all the time. And generally when I say, "Hey, Mason, where are you at with this?" your answer is, "I don't know." Because you don't know. And that's okay. That's where you are. I can accept that. We can move on and we can find value in the things that we still agree on. Yeah. And so as you approach these conversations, if your goal is to convince somebody or take them out of a religion that they love or bring them back to a religion, you're going to cause emotional harm. It's because you are yanking against their defense mechanisms. Rather, if you work to understand where they are, extend that love, it doesn't change the type of our relationship, and let's focus on the things that we still have in common, you can have those connective relationships and grow into something where either, you eventually become on the same page about some things, or if you never get to that point, you have a healthy, wholesome, connective relationship with the people that you love and appreciate.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. So are we ready to dig in?
I think so.
Okay.
No time like the present.
No time like the present. No, that's not true. Sometimes bedtime is not in my present, and I'm just looking forward to it.
Yeah, that means let's do it now, right?
Bedtime it's 11 o'clock in the morning here.
Sometimes.
Alrighty. So rule number 1. Oh, you might want to get a pencil and a paper. Or also, feel free to listen to this podcast a couple of times. I'm going to go through this information fairly quickly. So if you're the type of person that learns best by taking notes and those types of things, absolutely go get that, be prepared, pause, hit the pause button, and let's...
I'm not sure you can actually learn this material from having heard it just one time, right? This is the kind of stuff you need to hear or read and then practice and then go back and read it again and practice and then include somebody. Yeah.
Right.
You spend a lot of time in your clinic practicing and teaching these things because it's not just a here you go now fly and
right.
be free.
I can't just hand them the worksheet and say your marriage is cured.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, sometimes I have clients who think that's all they need. Like I give them this. So I handed Mason one of my little folders that I use when I do my couples counseling that has all of the worksheets in one place. And they bring that back to each session, or they're supposed to bring it back each session. I normally have to give them the office copies because most people don't bring it back each session, even though, whatever. Anyway.
That reminds me of a story. A squirrel here for a second, right?
Squirrel.
Listening to Brene Brown talk about the first time. So she had done all of her research, her initial research about shame, and she was trying to put it together, and she couldn't figure out how to get it put together and what it meant. And so she went to a therapist. She watched it to the therapist, and she's like, look, I don't want to do any of that, like, sentimental crap or whatever, right? She's like, I just want to get down to what is wrong. Tell me what's wrong and how can I fix it? You have 6 weeks.
Right.
Just the idea that sometimes we have unrealistic expectations. We don't maybe know the depth of the issue and how to fix. Sometimes you probably could come in and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. And you're like, oh, that's simple. Boom, here you go. But most of the time, things are deeper than that.
That's, again, we've got an expectation that we're engaging in this conversation to solve a problem.
Right.
So
right.
We've got to shift that expectation. We're not
Right.
trying to solve a problem. We're not trying to get somebody to agree with us or see things our way. We're seeking understanding. The Gottmans talk about within every complaint there is a longing. And that is so true. If I want to sit here and say, like with your family, I would love to have a relationship with them where I can have a conversation about the church and it doesn't turn into this like heated political debate. I just want them to understand that I think Joseph Smith was a con man and I respect the fact that they don't.
Right.
Like,
and there can be mutual respect on that, despite what some people seem to think.
Right. If I say I think Joseph Smith's a con man and he was tried for it and whatnot, I'm going to get, that was a misunderstanding and you're wrong and how dare you, speak about and I'm just like, okay. This is, for me, this is the same thing as Mason. You love the old Superman movies and I think they're ridiculously stupid. Uh-oh. We might need to pause and do some Gottman conversations. I
think you'd better just move on.
But I can dislike the Superman movies, and Mason can absolutely adore them, and we can enjoy a conversation, and we can chuckle about some of the ridiculousness of the movie and talk about what's inspiring about it and enjoy it. I don't have to agree with your opinion on the movie for us to have a meaningful conversation about it. And that is one of the areas where I find that Mormons are emotionally immature in that there's an expectation that you understand and identify the things I find as truth. And if you don't, you're wrong, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and I think it almost it goes a little bit beyond that too, in that, because I know I've struggled with this as something I've identified in myself, or maybe you identified in myself. I'm not sure.
Who's the boss of you?
Anyway, that any kind of deviation from what you believe in a high demand religion feels like a personal attack. So when you say, I believe Joseph Smith was a con man, I've had to train myself to not take that personally. Like, because you say Joseph Smith is a con man, suddenly you're attacking me, which doesn't help you or me. And that's not what you're intending to do either. And I think that Mormons struggle with that. I would imagine that that's probably the case too for a lot of high demand religions, that talking about a differing opinion about the religion is not a personal attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not but it can be. It can be.
I'm not saying it right. Sure, it can be. A lot
of us in that post-Mormon or ex-Mormon community, we're not very nice. We're not.
True enough. Yeah.
We share the evidences for what made us leave, and then we tend to shame. Like, how can you be so stupid and still believe this after I've showed you all this stuff?
Right.
You know. So yeah, both parties are guilty of you're not agreeing with me.
That's a good point.
How dumb are you?
That's a good point. It happens on both sides.
It happens on both sides. So once again, you've got to go into the conversation seeking understanding. So Mason, why don't you read that quote again off of the Gottman-Rappaport intervention? You can find this in its full color version from the Gottman Institute at Gottman.com, GOTTMAN.com. Go, Mason.
And I'll put that into the show notes just so that it's there, just
Perfect.
so the link is right there for you.
Yeah, for you mean the Gottman.com link?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that sounds great.
So this is under the section that says rules for the speaker. Your task is to honestly talk about your feelings and beliefs about your position on this issue. Do not argue for or try to persuade your partner of your point of view. Just explain how you see things. Tell your partner your thoughts and feelings about your position on this issue.
Absolutely. And so
Emphasis added.
Emphasis added. I love it. You did a great job, babe. You can have the quotes all the time. Okay. So, yay. So anyway, when you're engaging in these conversations, you're going to take one of two roles. And those two roles are the speaker or the listener. And there are different rules for engagement depending on what role you are in. So right now, I'm the speaker and y'all are the listener. So you better obey the rules. I'm just teasing. I'm the teacher. So, but as you shift back and forth between these two roles through what Sue Johnson, who is I think she's the ACT person at commitment. Anyway, Sue Johnson, I can't remember her book is right here at the tip of my tongue, but it's not coming out. But I'll find it in a little bit and add that in here. But she calls them
Johnston with a T.
No, I think it's Johnson.
Okay.
Joh. Yeah, Sue Johnson. So anyway, she calls these dialogue dances, and really what it is respecting and staying in your role until the time in the conversation is appropriate for those roles to switch. So as the speaker in the conversation, you want to talk about your feelings first.